Hello and welcome to Writer Wednesday, which is actually probably going to be Thursday because I had Victor today, so I'm not doing this until this evening. By the time I get it edited and uploaded, it's going to be Thursday. So I apologize for that, but I think it'll be worth the wait. First, I wanted to say that when I very first started using tarot to help open the door to my imagination for writing, I really had no idea of what I was doing. But I paid attention to what Arwen said, and I researched a couple of different ebooks before I ever got Arwen's course. And that's how I came upon Arwen's course, was looking for some stuff, and I found it on YouTube and her tarot scope, which she does on Patreon now. And I found tarot for writers as well. There are a couple of different books. What I essentially did was start paying attention to what was on the card, and that I picked up from the images that were on the card. So what I've done is pulled some tarot cards and some archetype cards. I have listed out some of the tarot cards and what they mean for some of the characters. I have an extra character, well, not an extra. I have two characters I have not done that for yet. And then I have not looked at what the archetype cards mean, but I went ahead and pulled them to save time so I don't have to shuffle the cards and pull cards and stuff like that. I still have some cards to pull, but these are going to essentially be the cards that I've pulled for my novel because I waited to do this. I meant to do this ahead of time, but of course I didn't end up doing that, so you know how it goes. Okay, what I've done is in my writer bullet journal, I have listed some of the characters. The main character, the protagonist, is our hero. I'm actually writing my novel from her point of view. She comes from a family of psychics. They call themselves psychics. Back in the day, though, a lot of people refer to people that way as oracles and prophets, and some people called them witches. Whether or not she's a witch doesn't really matter. I may change some of the book, but the premise for now, a witch cursed her family many generations ago. She is the 7th generation, and if she doesn't reverse the curse, then the curse is going to continue for another 7 generations. I pulled for her, which was really kind of ironic, the Justice card. And at first I'm looking at that card and I'm going, Justice? She's not, I pulled the Justice card before and it made sense. But this one, I was thinking of what the Justice card meant to me, and I wasn't really seeing what was on the actual card. So if you look up the Justice card, the hero is the family's peacemaker. She's also psychic. That is one of the definitions, as well as a gifted prophet. That was in the book, and is the family's gatekeeper. She's a goddess in modern times, is what the book said for some of it. But then I got to looking at it after reading what that said, because I'm thinking justice, the scales and the law, judges. But I see that sword. She's got a belt on. So there's some kind of, that's for that sword most likely. But she's under a rainbow. She's got the scales of justice. There's this feather and the sword. And I'm thinking, she's standing in a field of roses. There's mountains and clouds and the rainbow and stuff. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, that kind of made sense. Well, then I pulled the warrior card for the archetypes. Now, the light attributes for the warrior: strength, skill, discipline, and toughness of will, heroism, stoicism, and self-sacrifice in conquering the ego. Shadow attributes: trading ethical principles for victory at any cost, indifference to the suffering inflicted on others. Doesn't really sound like my protagonist, but in the beginning, strength and skill and discipline and toughness of will, not so much. She's not unethical, but she's definitely not in balance. Those scales again. Her light and dark attributes are not in balance. Some people may think of, it says, trading ethical principles for victory at any cost, indifference to the suffering. Sometimes on the road to to saving people, sometimes sacrifices do have to be made. And they say self-sacrifice conquering the ego. Well, I'm thinking she's going to turn into this warrior. She's going to become this warrior. If you look at the picture on the warrior card, you kind of get the same thing. You know, that looks like a Native American warrior, or maybe that's what it looks like to me. So I'm thinking, okay, that kind of makes sense. So then you get to the antagonist. And for the antagonist, I pulled the Knight of Cups. Cups usually is like love. He does look dark. He's like angry. He's got his hands up in the air. Either he's quitting or he's shouting. An insecure young man from the family of the witch who cursed her family. He wants to prove himself by conquering the hero. So when I pulled what information I found on this card, and then I kept looking at it, it was like, yeah, okay. He's stopped. He's angry. He's lashing out, jealous, insecure. So I pulled the hedonist card, and it's a woman on here, but gender doesn't really matter necessarily. The hedonist, the light attributes are inspires creative energy to embrace the good things in life, celebrates the beauty in yourself. But the shadow attributes pursues pleasure to the detriment of health, indulges at the expense of others. He's definitely selfish. Now maybe he had a chant before to inspire others and use his creative energy, his intelligence, his youth for positive things. He's good looking. He's a warrior, but he would be the trading ethical principles for victory at any cost, indifference to the suffering inflicted on others would be him. So I'm thinking, okay, so I have a hedonist for my antagonist. That is pretty cool though, because it makes you think, you know, I'm looking at the pictures and that woman, you know, you see in plays and stuff with Shakespeare, stuff like that, and you know, the Roman Empire and different things where they're being fed grapes in the fan, and you know, I looked at her and that's immediately what I thought of. And when I saw him, I thought, well, it almost to me was like he was pissed off at the horse. Maybe the horse stopped in his tracks and he's pissed off, or maybe he stopped the horse and he's like yelling and angry something hasn't went his way. So the protagonist in the book Tarot for Writers, when she talks about characterization, she talks about how the antagonist and the protagonist both have what they call foils, F-O-I-L-S. And they're sort of people who step in almost like a sidekick or have a role to play. And for the protagonist, it's the Fool. And I pulled the Priest card, archetype card for that. And the protagonist, the Fool, usually it's for them, it's all about family, it's all about like being loyalty or naive and innocent and inexperienced. They do something because they care for that person or because they're doing good or they think it's a good thing, but they maybe this person doesn't have a whole lot of common sense, or maybe it's so spiritual in nature that they're always striving to be altruistic. The Priest for light attributes would be facilitates spiritual commitment, serves as a channel of spiritual energy. The shadow attributes violates the trust of your spiritual community, seduced by your own spiritual role. Well, that second part won't work for this character, so I know it's the light attributes. If you look at the Fool, looks kind of dandified, but not really. You know, there's the rabbit, and he's looks happy-go-lucky, definitely on a journey. And I'm thinking because of the Priest, it's a spiritual journey. So this has to be somebody who is in the protagonist's life that would give her spiritual guidance. Maybe she's gone to that person, this hair, sorry y'all. But maybe she's gone to that person for some kind of spiritual guidance. And when I started thinking about it more and more as I looked at these, so I'm thinking the protagonist Fool is going to be a friend of her grandmother's, somebody who she's grown up with her whole entire life as a priestess or a a woman of the church or somebody in a spiritual, maybe she's the head psychic, you know, in the neighborhood or something. Or maybe she's the only other psychic in the family. She could be an aunt. She's going to unwittingly tell the hero's grandmother that she has a vision of our hero, our protagonist, traveling through the veil and speaking with an ancestor from, we'll say Scotland. So the grandmother's going to get very anxious and nervous, and she's going to call our hero. They're going to have a conversation, and it's going to make our protagonist get nervous and anxious and upset. The grandmother, I'm thinking she's going to die of natural causes. I don't want to murder her. I'm not ready for that kind of an inciting incident. My other one kind of starts that way. I have actually thought about making some changes based on these cards, but I'm not quite ready to talk about those yet. But anyway, when she's talking to the grandmother's ghost, some things are going to come up. Some more things from that vision are going to come up. Let's talk about the grandmother moment. When I pulled the card for the grandmother, I pulled the Tower. Now the Tower is a pretty big card for change and things. It's a really good indicator. I pulled the Mother card as far as archetype goes. So I didn't look up everything. I know a lot of what the Tower means, but I thought I'd tell you what some of it says in this, because these are the tarot cards I'm actually using, the English Magic Tarot. So we're going to look up the Tower. I'm going to tell you what it says in here about the Tower, and then I'm going to pull the information from the other book about the Tarot for Writers book. So the Tower represents inspiration, fury, revolution, change. A storm is breaking over the tower, which is on fire, and two ravens look on. The Tower indicates sudden spiritual insight or illumination. It heralds revolutionary ideas that destroy old paradigms. It suggests the toppling of an institution, a despised regime, or even an empire, making way for changes. Just be careful not to get consumed by the flames. Ravens have long been associated with the Tower. Legend says that if ever they leave, the British monarchy will fall. And they say that that legend has its origins in the much older Welsh myth of Bran the Blessed, the raven god, whose head was buried beneath the Tower of London. Bran the Blessed, a tower, the ravens. Oh, well, Game of Thrones. We've got the Dark Tower with Stephen King. I'm thinking there was a tower and stuff like that, and the Lord of the Rings. Yeah, so a lot of reference here. She says in this book, when she sees ravens, she immediately thinks of Woden, the old English god of poetry and eloquence, magic, divine intoxication, and fury, where that pair of sacred ravens are called thought and memory. Regardless of which god speaks to you, the message is the same. Inspiration comes with divine force. The tower will always crumble. The new smashes the old. The Tower indicates the sudden or dramatic end of something, the smashing of some worldly endeavor or institution. So I thought that was very interesting. Very interesting. So like I said, I pulled most of the cards, but I didn't pull all of the cards. Let's look up what it says for Mother. Life giver, source of nature and nourishment, shows patience, devotion, caring, and unconditional love. Mother Nature, capacity to forgive. You don't need to be a biological mother, but you must have a lifelong devotion to nurturing and protecting the environment or supporting any life form, including giving birth to books or ideas. Or Mr. Mom, it says. Maybe the Tower is the crumbling of this generational curse. Maybe the grandmother's ghost helping our protagonist is how the Tower is going to well, it's going to crumble, but how, because the grandmother dies and then she's interacting with the ghost and we've got a story to tell. I'm thinking maybe the grandmother's card being the Tower is that somehow the grandmother's ghost is going to help crumble the old, which would be the family being cursed, maybe. I like getting ideas from things like this. It really helps me think. If you read Arwen's book, what she says about characterization is that you can pull 5 cards per character. And what you do is you pull the cards and you get a court character spread. You use only the court cards, which there are 16 court cards. Those are your kings, queens, pages, and knights or knaves, or people call them different things. So you ask these 5 questions. What was your hero like as a young person? What does your hero do for a living? Who is your hero's role model? What is your hero's weakness? What is your hero's strength? And she talks about pulling cards. Also, there's actually spreads you can do to get information about your character's past, present, and future, the career that your character is in, all different kinds of things. You can also pull cards randomly to get information about your characters. So you can do other things. At the end of Arwen's book, she has some spreads that are designed to help you get to know your characters. She has a video about goals and motivation and conflict, which are also helpful. But I figured I'd give you just some information to kind of start. And what I usually do is I pull what is called the Hero's Journey spread or layout. Arwen has it in her book. There is one in this book. It is approximately 13 or more cards, depending on which one you're talking about. The Hero's Journey. In this one, it has 16 cards. In Arwen's book, she has a 13 card spread for the Hero's Journey. But whatever you feel comfortable with is what you would do for that. So I'm going to be taking my cards and I'm going to be doing more information and writing all of that down for my cast of characters. And I'm pretty excited because I have just been doing some general information. I still need to come up with some names for some of the other characters because I have a mentor, the love interest. For the love interest, I pulled the High Priestess, which most people consider to be a feminine card, and I pulled the Prince archetype card. So found that quite interesting. For the mentor, I pulled the Hierophant and the teacher card, which is actually kind of ironic because he's, the mentor. Would have been even more ironic if I had pulled the actual mentor card. The antagonist foil, his sidekick, and that's the Ten of Swords and the student card. So like I said, I'm going to be writing down the rest of the information and what I gather from these cards. I will also be pulling a Hero's Journey tarot spread sometime probably over this weekend and chronicling all of it. I will be printing out the little free printable tarot cards again and putting them in my bullet journal for the actual Hero's Journey spread. I find that very interesting. So if I can get that done, I will do a flip through of that and then we'll talk about that probably in next Wednesday's Writer Wednesday. I want to do a video where I talk about my writing and how I got started writing, really writing, NaNoWriMo, and how I get like a lot of writing done when I do get a lot of writing done and things like that, because that was a question in the Q&A. Let's see how I am for time. This is going to be a little bit of a long Writer Wednesday. So for those of you who want to continue to listen, because I'm going to talk about that, I'll do that now because it won't take very long. But for those of you who just wanted to watch about the tarot and the characterization and stuff like that, I hope you have a good one, and thanks for watching. I'll see you again next Writer Wednesday, or Monday's coffee chat, or Friday's journal video. Bye, y'all, for that one. Okay, so how I got into writing. I've talked about this. I have been into books since I was before kindergarten. I love books, absolutely love books. But I started writing letters to my grandfather who lived in New Orleans. I started pretending I was a teacher. I got the Snoopy book, which is, you can't see it, but it's up there. It was a dark and stormy night. It's on that very top red shelf up there, the one you can't really, right there, the one you can't really see. I got that book in the early 70s. I don't know. I think I was 6 or 7, maybe. I also got Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little and The Trumpet and the Swan. I have those books. They're some of my, Stuart Little was one of my favorites. I wanted to be a writer. Snoopy and the Dark and Stormy Night made me want to be a writer. But then reading books like Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little and stuff, I fell in love. And then I got a hold of the Chronicles of Narnia. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. At the time, I didn't know about all the symbolism and stuff that was in it. It just was a really good story. By the time I was in middle school, I think fifth grade, actually, right before middle school, I started reading Stephen King's Salem's Lot. By high school, I was reading all of Stephen King's books, and that was in the 70s when I was in fifth grade. That was in 77. So I ended up reading Christine and Carrie and stuff like that. So I followed King's career as his books came out. Over the last probably 5 or 6 years, I haven't read the books as they brand new as they come out. I've kind of waited a while because I had to slow down on my book purchasing stuff because I got over the last few years, I kind of got into some other hobbies like art and stuff. So now I sometimes get the books unless it's something I really want to collect. Like anything that's Dark Tower, I tend to buy brand new. Some of the other books I will buy used from like thrift books. But back to writing. So I started writing. Reading was such an integral part of my life that I wanted to become a writer. I wanted to write books. In high school, I was absolutely in love with learning as much as I could about literature and creative writing, and I edited people's papers in high school that I knew that wanted help for free and stuff. I love reading and writing. To me, they go hand in hand. I love to read a good story, and I wanted to be able to write a good story. I want to be a good storyteller. I like reading literary fiction, some of it, not all of it, some of it. I think it just depends. I love some of the classics, but I don't like all of the classics. A lot of that 100 books you need to read, all those books they want you to read in high school and college and stuff. I don't know that I would want to write that way, the way that some of those books are written. But I started writing as a journaler, Dear Diary stuff. That went to writing stories and jokes and stuff like that back in elementary school. Like I said, when I wrote my grandfather letters, I would write him stories, I would write him jokes. And then by the time I was in high school, I was writing poetry and short stories. Hadn't really delved into novels, but I was delving into short stories and poetry. And then I wanted to go to college. I got a partial scholarship for journalism. I decided that, everybody in my family was like, look, writers don't make any money. You have to get really famous before you make any money. And it takes a long time. So you're either going to be a teacher or something. You need like a plan B to get you to the point where your plan A works until then. So I decided that being a journalist and maybe becoming a photojournalist, somebody who wrote their own stories and took pictures, I wanted to do both. That was the artist in me. I applied for it, got a partial scholarship, but I didn't know what I know now, or I'd have went anyway. And anyway, I didn't go to college for that. I went to college later on in life. I started college in my very early 30s. I did take some college classes on and off in my 20s, but I ended up going to work for a bank after high school, and I worked in finance and banking and accounting and stuff for over 25 years. So I put the writing thing down for a hobby, and that was because I got married and I had kids, I got divorced. So I was raising my kids and supporting my kids, and so writing was just my hobby for a long time. I put writing away though, and I would on occasion delve into like some short stories and some poetry. I wrote poetry on and off for a long time. Mr. Rockstar and I, since we've been together, I have only written a handful of poems though. For me, poetry comes when I'm in a darker place. Maybe I can change that, but I think part of it, every now and again I'll write a poem, but it's harder for me to write poetry in a happy place than it is in a darker place. Being a single parent was rough. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. Right now, I could probably write poetry. Not because of Mr. Rockstar, but because of, you know, the stuff with my dad and Mr. Rockstar being sick. I have a lot of anxiety and stress. I'm doing pretty well with coping with it, but writing, journaling, and writing fiction and nonfiction and stuff really helps anchor me. It helps keep me grounded. It's therapeutic to me. So the more writing I can get done, whether it's writing in my journal, text journaling, or diary style journaling, or morning pages, any kind of writing, to me, I love. It's like when I read. I had a really hard time when I was doing the Artist's Way for the week where you're not supposed to read, because I am the kind of person where if I don't have a book handy, I will read the back of a box of cereal. I will read anything and everything. I am an avid reader. So yeah, that was that week. I didn't make it through that whole week without reading. When I'm doing something like NaNoWriMo, or when I'm writing on my own and it's not NaNoWriMo, up until the last 6 months or so, no, not quite 6 months, on and off, it happens to me. I'll get in these moods in the zone and I will write like crazy. I will sometimes write 5,000 or 7,000 words in a day, no big deal. And when I get into that zone, I mean, I'm into it. And then there are other days when writing 500 words is a struggle. Some days when writing anything other than the journal stuff, morning pages, and my journal stuff is a struggle, right? Working on my novel. So on the days when I can't per se write sentences for my novel, that's when I do something creative for the novel so that my head is still in the novel, and I will write like a journal entry as if I were the character, or I'll write a newspaper article as if I were writing about what was happening or something that happened in the book, so that, you know, it's for like from the past, from something like for the novel. So it kind of puts me in the headspace of my novel without actually trying to write dialogue or anything. And that helps. And those are words for your novel. I tuck them, usually they're in my, somewhere in my notebook for my novel. I think this time around I'm probably going to write those at the back of the journal for the novel, so that they're in a separate place in the journal, but still in the journal, because I keep a journal for every novel. And I do a lot of that. I also write by hand a lot. Like if I can't get to the laptop, when I didn't have the laptop for a good long time because it had to be fixed thanks to the Windows update that messed up my laptop. I wrote by hand a lot that one, because sitting at this desk for so long all the time, I need to move around and stuff. So I would change position. I'd lay on the couch, I'd get in the recliner, I'd have my pen and my notebook, and I would write by hand. And then at the end of the day, I would count a few pages to see how many words there were on each page, and then I'd do an average. So if I completed one whole page, that was an average of about, say, 250 words. So I knew that, you know, if I wrote like 6 pages or 5 pages, then I had a pretty good idea how much I wrote for that day. And that works pretty well, because there are some times when it's very easy for me to take a notebook and a pen, throw it in my purse whenever I go somewhere, and if I'm waiting in line or whatever, I can write down ideas, I can write down stuff, and it's not a big deal. And that's how I get a lot of writing done, is because I don't always do my writing on the computer. On the laptop, on the desktop, a lot of times I'll write in a notebook. I have been known to write on napkins at restaurants. I've been known to write on paper towels, on post-it notes. One year I couldn't find my notebook, and I wrote a bunch of stuff on a whole bunch of post-its, and I just numbered the post-its. And then when I found my notebook again, I put it all in the notebook. So, that's pretty much what works for me. I find that because of the ADHD, if you notice I'm fidgeting, because of the ADHD, there are times when I can't necessarily focus for too long on any certain thing. So that's when a lot of times when I'm in the Scrivener project, I'll do more in-depth character sketches. I will do more journaling as if I were the main character or the antagonist or the love interest. It really helps you get a sense of the character when you do journal entries as if you were that character. You can do it on a past event that took place on the novel, in the novel, or an event that's happening right then and there. And you'd write the journal entry from that character's point of view. And it really does help you, I think, get a feel for what the characters are like. And that's how I get as much writing done as I do. July's Camp NaNoWriMo, I didn't really get very much writing done at all. I did get some writing done, and I felt really good about that because that was just such a hectic month. Finding out my dad had cancer in July made it very rough. I also found out that Mr. Rockstar has Crohn's disease. That wasn't helpful either. I was just glad that his biopsy didn't turn out to be cancer as well. So that's what I do, you know. And sometimes, depending on what it is, like when I'm super stressed or super anxious, sometimes I'll write, whether it's the journal entry or fiction or whatever, and it really helps me. So I hope that answered some of the questions. If you have any more questions about it, please let me know. You can let me know down below. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one, and I will see you again soon. Bye.